Wait, I will protect him. The bold declaration echoes through a tense Manhattan courtroom, where tech billionaire Noel sits isolated, his elite lawyer mysteriously vanished. Facing $23 million contract fraud charges from Vortex Enterprises, his legacy hangs in the balance. Heads turn sharply to the source. Nia Johnson, a 25-year-old black woman in a humble apron, forehead beaded with sweat, gripping a worn folder of documents. Snickers ripple. The maid playing lawyer? Hilarious. Yet Nia holds her ground. Your Honor, I've dissected this case down to every detail. I know these forged contracts inside out. Better than anyone in this room. The judge freezes. Noel glares in disbelief, and the prosecutor sneers. But this audacious moment ignites a riveting tale of treachery. Noel's stepmother's hidden betrayal and a sinister corporate plot unraveling at the seams. Intrigued? Hit subscribe for more heart-racing narratives and comment your location below. Where are you tuning in from? Hang on tight. Nia's discoveries will shatter expectations, exposing truths that could dismantle an empire. The jaw-dropping twists await. Don't miss out. The dim glow of a single lamp casts long shadows across the cramped basement apartment in Harlem, where Nia Johnson hunched over a scarred wooden table, her fingers tracing lines of faded text in a dog-eared law textbook. It was well past midnight, the kind of hour when the city outside hummed with distant sirens and the occasional rumble of a late-night train. At 25, Nia was a ghost in her own life, visible only when needed, invisible otherwise. Her dark skin gleamed under the light, a faint sheen of sweat from the day's labors still clinging to her brow. She wore a simple gray sweater, threadbare at the elbows, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, strands escaping like whispers of rebellion. Nia's story wasn't one of glamour or easy ascent. Born in the Bronx to a single mother who juggled 3 jobs, cleaning offices by day, waitressing by night, and somehow finding time to instill dreams in her daughter. Nia had always been the fighter. Her mother, Evelyn, had scraped together every penny for Nia's education, believing that knowledge was the ladder out of poverty. "You're gonna be a lawyer, baby girl," Evelyn would say, her voice hoarse from exhaustion but fierce with conviction. "You'll stand in those big courts and make the world listen." And for a while it seemed possible. Nia had earned a scholarship to Columbia Law School, one of the nation's elite institutions. The campus was a world away from her upbringing. Towering stone buildings, libraries stacked with leather-bound volumes, professors who spoke of justice as if it were a living entity. In her first year, Nia thrived. She devoured case studies on economic crimes, dissected Supreme Court rulings on fraud and corporate malfeasance, and dreamed of becoming a defender of the overlooked. Her notes were meticulous, her arguments sharp in mock trials. Classmates envied her insight, professors noted her potential, but dreams, Nia learned, were fragile things, easily shattered by the weight of reality. In her second year, Evelyn fell ill. Breast cancer, aggressive and unrelenting. Medical bills piled up like accusations, devouring the family's meager savings. Nia's part-time jobs weren't enough. The scholarship covered tuition, but not the mounting debts. Evelyn's treatments required sacrifices, skipped meals, unpaid utilities, and finally the heartbreaking decision. Nia dropped out. "I'll go back," she promised her mother, tears stinging her eyes as she packed her books into boxes. "This is just a pause." Evelyn had nodded weakly, but they both knew the truth. Pauses could stretch into eternities. Evelyn passed away 6 months later, leaving Nia with a void that no courtroom victory could fill and debts that chained her to survival. To pay off the loans and medical bills, Nia took whatever work she could find. She became a housekeeper, first for anonymous families in the suburbs, then landing a position at the sprawling estate of Noel Harrington, the young tech billionaire whose name splashed across headlines like digital fireworks. Noel was the wunderkind of Silicon Valley's East Coast outpost, innovative, charismatic, and heir to a fortune built on software empires. His mansion in upstate New York was a fortress of glass and steel, overlooking manicured lawns that Nia scrubbed and polished daily. Her days blurred into routine, dawn arrivals, endless chores, dusting crystal chandeliers, mopping marble floors, preparing meals for Noel's infrequent gatherings. But Nia never stopped learning. By night, in her basement haven, she pored over online legal databases, listened to podcasts on white-collar crime, and followed high-profile cases with the intensity of a prosecutor. Economic fraud fascinated her, the way corporations wove webs of deceit, forging contracts and manipulating markets to bury the little people. She kept a folder of notes, handwritten analyses of rulings, cross-referenced with real-world scandals. It was her secret rebellion, a flame kept alive in the darkness. Noel barely noticed her. To him, she was just the help, efficient, quiet, replaceable. But Nia noticed everything. Working in his home, she overheard snippets of boardroom calls, glimpsed confidential documents left carelessly on desks. When rumors of his impending trial surfaced, federal charges of contract fraud totaling over $23 million, tied to a shady deal with Vortex Enterprises, she paid attention. Vortex was a shadowy conglomerate, ostensibly a partner in Noel's ventures, but whispers suggested deeper entanglements. Nia dug in her spare time, piecing together public filings and news reports. The case reeked of foul play, altered agreements, suspicious timestamps, accusations that didn't align with Noel's known business practices. The trial date loomed like a storm cloud. Nia wasn't supposed to be there. Her shift ended at noon that fateful day. But something pulled her, a sense of injustice perhaps, or the echo of her mother's voice urging her to fight. She took the subway downtown, her apron still tied under her coat, the folder of notes clutched like a shield. The Manhattan Federal Courthouse was a monolith of authority, its halls echoing with the footsteps of suited lawyers and stern bailiffs. Nia slipped into the gallery, heart pounding, as the proceedings began. Noel sat at the defense table, his usual poise cracked. His lawyer, a shark in pinstripes named Harlan Voss, was nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled of a sudden disappearance, perhaps fleeing the country. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Elena Reyes, laid out the charges with surgical precision, forged signatures, manipulated financial records, a scheme to defraud Vortex out of millions. The judge, an older man with a gravelly voice, scanned the room. "Mr. Harrington, where is your counsel?" Noel stammered. He didn't show. I don't know." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Journalists scribbled furiously. Vortex's representative smirked from the plaintiff's bench. Nia felt a fire ignite in her chest, the same fire that had driven her to Columbia, that had sustained her through grief and drudgery. This wasn't right. She knew the case. She'd studied it obsessively. The forgeries were obvious to anyone who looked closely. IP traces leading to phantom servers. Language inconsistencies screaming foreign interference. She stood, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Wait! I will protect him!" The courtroom froze. All eyes turned to her, a black woman in an apron, standing defiant in a sea of suits. Laughter bubbled up from the gallery, sharp and mocking. "Who the hell is she?" someone whispered. "The cleaning lady thinks she's Perry Mason?" Nia's knees trembled, but her gaze held steady. She had crossed the line. There was no turning back. This was her origin story unfolding, not in a lecture hall, but in the crucible of real justice. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Young lady, who are you?" "Nia Johnson, Your Honor," she replied, stepping forward. "And I know this case better than anyone here. Let me prove it." The air thickened with anticipation. Noel's eyes widened in shock. The prosecutor leaned forward, intrigued. In that moment, Nia's life pivoted, from shadows to spotlight, from maid to defender. But the true test was just beginning. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan loomed like a bastion of unyielding stone, its corridors echoing with the clipped footsteps of attorneys in tailored suits and the murmur of spectators hungry for scandal. On this crisp autumn morning, the air inside courtroom 12B crackled with anticipation. Journalists crammed into the back rows, notebooks poised like weapons, while Vortex Enterprises executives sat stone-faced on the plaintiff's side, their eyes gleaming with predatory confidence. At the center of it all sat Noel Harrington, the 32-year-old tech prodigy whose face had graced Forbes covers and TED stages. Today, however, his sharp features were etched with bewilderment and barely concealed panic. His custom Armani suit hung slightly askew, as if the fabric itself sensed the unraveling of his world. Noel's lead counsel, Harlan Voss, a legal titan with a reputation for dismantling federal cases like a surgeon excising tumors, had vanished. No calls, no emails, just an empty chair at the defense table and whispers of foul play. Had he fled? Been bought off? The rumors swirled like smoke, but the facts were stark. Noel faced charges of contract fraud exceeding $23 million, accused of forging agreements with Vortex to siphon funds through phantom ventures. Vortex, the sprawling conglomerate intertwined with Noel's family holdings since his father's era, painted him as a greedy heir, willing to betray partnerships for personal gain. The stakes were colossal, not just financial ruin, but the obliteration of a legacy built on innovation and trust. Judge Elias Thornton, a grizzled veteran with silver hair and a gaze that could pierce steel, ascended the bench with a measured gait. His gavel struck once, silencing the room like a thunderclap. This court is now in session. United States versus Noel Harrington. Counsel, please identify yourselves. Elena Reyes, the prosecutor, a formidable Latina woman in her 40s, her navy suit as sharp as her intellect, rose smoothly. Elena Reyes for the United States, Your Honor. Her voice carried the weight of authority, laced with a subtle edge of triumph. All eyes turned to Noel. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the vacant seat beside him. Your Honor, my attorney, Mr. Voss, he's not here. I don't know what happened. He was supposed to... Murmurs erupted from the gallery. A Vortex lawyer leaned back, smirking. Judge Thornton frowned, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. Mr. Harrington, this is a federal proceeding. Without representation, we cannot proceed. Are you requesting a continuance? Noel opened his mouth, words failing him. The room felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with schadenfreude. That's when Nia Johnson made her move. From the back row, where she'd slipped in unnoticed, her heart hammered like a war drum. The apron beneath her coat felt like armor now, a reminder of her invisibility turned weapon. She rose, her voice slicing through the din. Wait, I will protect him. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Heads whipped around, eyes widening in disbelief. There she stood, a young black woman, apron peeking from her coat, a folder clutched in her hands like a talisman. Laughter bubbled up, cruel, incredulous. Is this a joke? A reporter muttered. The maid thinks she's Atticus Finch? Snickers spread like wildfire. Vortex team exchanged amused glances. Even Noel stared, his expression a mix of confusion and disdain. Who the hell are you? He hissed under his breath. Judge Thornton banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in the court! Young lady, approach the bench immediately. Bailiff, escort her forward. Nia stepped into the aisle, her legs steady despite the tremor in her core. Whispers followed her like shadows. Probably the cleaning staff. This is ridiculous. But she ignored them, her mind racing through the case files she'd memorized. She'd spent nights dissecting the contracts, spotting the anomalies in signatures, the mismatched timestamps, the subtle shifts in phrasing that screamed forgery. At the front, she faced the judge. Your Honor, my name is Nia Johnson. I work as household staff for Mr. Harrington, but I've studied law at Columbia, though I had to leave due to family hardships. I've followed this case obsessively. I know the evidence inside out. The contracts were forged. I can prove it. Please let me represent him temporarily until proper counsel arrives. The laughter crescendoed. Reyes shot to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is preposterous. She's not licensed. This mocks the justice system. Noel leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. You, scrubbing my floors doesn't qualify you for this. Sit down before you embarrass us both. But Nia didn't waver. Her dark eyes locked on the judge. Your Honor, I've pored over every SEC filing, every deposition. The IP address on the disputed signature traces to Zurich, not Mr. Harrington's office in New York. And the language in the revised clauses? It's laced with European legal idioms, force majeure, phrased in a way no American drafter would use. Vortex is setting him up. I have notes right here. She held up her folder, pages brimming with handwritten annotations, cross-references to precedents like the Enron scandal and Madoff's fraud. The room hushed. Judge Thornton adjusted his glasses, peering at her with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Miss Johnson, this is highly irregular. Are you aware that practicing law without a license is a crime? Yes, sir, Nia replied, her voice steady. But right now, Mr. Harrington has no one, and justice shouldn't wait for the privileged. If you'll allow me to speak for this preliminary hearing, under your supervision, I promise to lay out the facts. Reyes interjected again. Your Honor, this sets a dangerous precedent. She's unqualified. Thornton held up a hand, silence falling like a curtain. He studied Nia for a long moment, then glanced at Noel. Mr. Harrington, do you consent to this unconventional arrangement for today? Noel hesitated, his face flushing. Betrayal flickered in his eyes. Betrayal by his lawyer, by the system, and now this absurd lifeline from his maid. But desperation won. Fine, he muttered. What do I have to lose? The judge nodded. Very well. Miss Johnson, you may proceed as amicus curiae for this session only, but one misstep and you're out. Bailiff, swear her in. As Nia placed her hand on the Bible, the courtroom buzzed with electric tension. She took her seat beside Noel, who avoided her gaze. Reyes began her opening, painting Noel as a manipulative tycoon. But when Nia's turn came, she rose, her voice clear and commanding. Your Honor, the prosecution's case hinges on a forged revision dated March 15th. But metadata shows it was altered from an offshore server. Here's the printout, highlighted in yellow, and compare the phrasing. Standard U.S. contracts use material breach, not this convoluted essential non-performance, straight from EU directives. Thornton leaned forward, intrigued. Reyes objected fiercely, but the seed of doubt was planted. After heated exchanges, the judge recessed. We'll adjourn until tomorrow for evidence review. Miss Johnson, be prepared. As the gavel fell, Nia exhaled, the weight of the moment crashing down. Noel shot her a grudging look. Don't screw this up. But in her eyes burned a fire that no mockery could extinguish. The first hearing was over, but the battle had just begun. The echo of the gavel still reverberated through courtroom 12B like a distant thunderclap, sealing Nia Johnson's improbable fate. Sworn in as a makeshift defender, she stood at the defense table, her worn folders splayed open before her like a map to buried treasure. The air was thick with disbelief, a palpable fog of skepticism that clung to every polished surface. Journalists in the gallery scribbled furiously, their pens scratching like accusations, while Vortex Enterprises lawyers exchanged smug glances, certain this farce would implode. Noel Harrington sat rigid beside her, his jaw clenched, radiating a mix of fury and reluctant dependence. He leaned in, his whisper a venomous hiss. You better know what you're doing, or you'll drag me down with you? Nia ignored him, her pulse a steady drumbeat against the rising tide of mockery. As she straightened her apron, now a badge of defiance rather than drudgery, the laughter began in earnest. It started as a chuckle from a burly spectator in the third row, a Vortex consultant perhaps, and spread like wildfire. Look at her, someone sneered loudly enough for all to hear. The help thinks she's Clarence Darrow. What's next? Mopping the floor while cross-examining? Titters erupted from the press section. A young associate prosecutor stifled a grin, while Elena Reyes crossed her arms, her eyes gleaming with predatory amusement. This is federal court, not community theater, Reyes quipped under her breath, drawing more snickers. Judge Thornton cleared his throat, his gavel hovering like a warning. Enough. Miss Johnson, you may present your opening statement, but remember this is on a short leash. Nia took a deep breath, the scent of polished wood and stale coffee grounding her. She wasn't here for approval, she was here for truth. Her voice, when it emerged, was clear and resonant, cutting through the derision like a blade through silk. Your Honor, members of the court, the charges against Mr. Harrington are built on a foundation of sand. Forged documents designed to crumble under scrutiny. I've spent months analyzing every facet of this case, not from a corner office, but from the shadows where the overlooks see everything. And what I've found isn't just irregularities. It's a deliberate setup. The laughter faltered, replaced by uneasy shifts in seats. Nia flipped open her folder, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. She held up a sheaf of printouts, pages marked with yellow highlighter, and scribbled notes in her precise handwriting. Let's start with Exhibit A, the revised joint venture agreement dated March 15th, which the prosecution claims Mr. Harrington signed to defraud Vortex Enterprises of $23 million. But examine the digital signature trail. She passed copies to the bailiff, who distributed them with a bemused expression. Reyes interjected sharply. Objection, Your Honor. This evidence hasn't been authenticated. For all we know, it's doodles from her lunch break. Sustained for now, Thornton rumbled, but his eyes scanned the document. Proceed with caution, Miss Johnson. Nia nodded, undeterred. The signature was applied via an electronic platform, standard practice. But the IP address log for that transaction? It traces not to Mr. Harrington's secure network in Manhattan, but to a server in Zurich, Switzerland. I've cross-referenced it with public WHOIS data. It's linked to an anonymous VPN provider known for masking origins in corporate espionage cases. Mr. Harrington was in New York that day. His calendar confirms a board meeting at his headquarters. How does a man sign a document from across the Atlantic without leaving his office? Murmurs rippled through the room now, not of mockery but intrigue. Noel glanced at her sidelong, his scowl softening into something akin to surprise. A reporter in the back whispered to a colleague, "She's got receipts?" But Nia wasn't done. She pulled out another page, this one a side-by-side comparison she'd meticulously compiled. Now, the language in the disputed clauses. Standard American contracts adhere to U.S. legal norms, clear, concise, rooted in common law precedents like those in the Uniform Commercial Code. But look here. The revision uses phrases like essential non-performance and force majeure with retrospective effect, terminology straight from European civil law traditions, influenced by the CISG or even Swiss Code of Obligations. No American drafter, especially one from Harrington's team, would phrase it this way. It's as if the document was ghost-written overseas and inserted to fabricate liability. Reyes leaped to her feet again. Objection! Speculation! She's not an expert. She's a housekeeper playing pretend. The judge held up a hand, his expression thoughtful. Overruled. Miss Johnson, do you have precedents to support this? Yes, Your Honor, Nia replied swiftly, flipping to tab sections. In the 2018 case of Global Tech versus Eurofinance, the Second Circuit dismissed similar fraud claims based on linguistic inconsistencies, citing forensic linguistics as key evidence. And in SEC versus Klein, mismatched IP trails led to acquittal. These aren't guesses, they're patterns from documented rulings. The courtroom had transformed. The initial jeers faded into a tense hush, broken only by the rustle of papers and the scratch of pens. Vortex's lead attorney, a slick man named Victor Lang, fidgeted with his tie, his earlier smirk replaced by a furrowed brow. Noel leaned closer to Nia, whispering, "How did you—" She didn't respond, her focus laser-sharp. Furthermore, the metadata on the file shows it was edited 3 times post-signature, timestamps that don't align with Harrington's access logs. I've printed the forensic report from a freeware tool I ran myself. It matches patterns in known forgery software. Reyes countered fiercely, her voice rising. This is amateur hour. We demand time to verify these claims. Judge Thornton nodded slowly, rubbing his chin. The weight of Nia's words hung in the air, a turning tide. Miss Reyes, your point is noted. Miss Johnson, you've raised compelling questions. The court will recess until tomorrow to allow for preliminary verification of these exhibits. Bailiff, collect the documents. As the gavel fell, the room erupted in a buzz of conversation. Journalists bolted for the doors, phones already dialing editors with headlines like, Maid turns maverick in Billionaire trial. Noel stood, staring at Nia with a mix of awe and suspicion. You just bought me time, but if this blows up, it won't, she said firmly, gathering her papers, because it's the truth. Outside in the hallway, Nia leaned against the cool marble wall, her breath coming in shallow bursts. The mockery had stung, but the shift in the room, the dawning respect in the judge's eyes, ignited something fierce within her. She wasn't just defending Noel, She was reclaiming her voice, silenced too long by circumstance. Little did she know, this was merely the opening salvo in a war that would expose far darker secrets. The courthouse steps felt like a gauntlet as Nia descended them, the autumn wind whipping at her coat like accusatory fingers. The first hearing had ended in a fragile victory. A recess granted, seeds of doubt sown, but the victory tasted bittersweet, laced with the sting of lingering mockery. Reporters swarmed like vultures, microphones thrusting forward. "Miss Johnson, how does a maid become a lawyer overnight?" one shouted. Nia pushed through without a word, her mind already racing ahead. She knew the forgeries were real, but why? Who stood to gain from framing Noel? The answers lay buried deeper, and she was determined to unearth them. Back in her Harlem basement, the lamp flickered as Nia spread her notes across the table, a chaotic mosaic of printouts and scribbles. The clock ticked past midnight, but sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Noel's parting words echoed in her ears. "You've bought time, but don't think this makes you my savior." His disdain had cut, but it fueled her. She booted up her old laptop, its fan whirring like a weary sigh, and delved into public records on Vortex Enterprises. The conglomerate was a behemoth, tentacles reaching into tech, finance, and real estate, intertwined with the Harrington family since Noel's father, the late Edmund Harrington, had forged the partnership decades ago. Edmund's death 5 years prior had been a tabloid spectacle, a sudden heart attack at 58, leaving Noel to inherit the empire at 27. But there was a shadow in the narrative. Celeste Harrington, Edmund's second wife and Noel's stepmother. Celeste, a poised socialite in her 50s with platinum hair and a smile that could charm diamonds from stone, had always projected maternal concern. "Noel's like my own son," she'd gushed in interviews, her hand on his arm in family photos. Yet Nia recalled overhearing fragments at the estate, Celeste's hushed phone calls in the study, her insistence on reviewing business documents, for Noel's sake. Suspicion gnawed at Nia like a persistent itch. She cross-referenced Vortex's board minutes with Harrington family trusts. Patterns emerged, subtle at first, like whispers in the dark. Vortex had pushed for aggressive expansions, funneling funds into joint ventures that disproportionately benefited their side. Then a breakthrough, an archived email leak from a minor Vortex scandal 2 years back. Buried in the dump was a message from Martin Lyles, Vortex's chief legal counsel, a wiry man with a reputation for ruthless tactics, to an unnamed recipient. "The widow's directive is clear. Consolidate assets under our umbrella. Use the heir's inexperience." The widow. Celeste had been Edmund's widow. Nia's heart skipped. Could Celeste be pulling strings from the shadows? Driven by instinct, Nia slipped into Noel's estate the next morning under the guise of her regular shift. The mansion was eerily quiet, servants bustling like ghosts. Noel was away, prepping for the resumed hearing, but Celeste was there, ensconced in the sunroom with a cup of tea and a stack of files. Nia lingered nearby, dusting shelves with feigned nonchalance, her ears attuned. Celeste's phone rang, and she answered in a low murmur. "Yes, Martin. The revision holds. Once he's discredited, the trusts revert to me. Family clause, remember? Edmund's will ensures it." Nia's duster froze mid-swipe. Edmund's will. Nia had glimpsed it once while organizing papers. It stipulated that if Noel faced moral or legal disqualification, control of the family holdings shifted to Celeste as trustee. The fraud charges weren't just about money. They were a calculated strike to seize the empire. Vortex, under Celeste's influence, had forged the contracts to trigger that clause, painting Noel as a fraudster to claim his inheritance. But proof was elusive. Nia needed more. That night she risked everything, returning to the estate after hours with a borrowed key from a sympathetic coworker. The house loomed dark and foreboding under the moon, security lights casting long shadows. Heart pounding, she crept to the study, flashlight beam dancing like a nervous sprite. Drawers yielded nothing at first, mundane receipts, old letters. Then in a locked filing cabinet she jimmied open with a hairpin, jackpot, a folder labeled Vortex Revisions. Inside, drafts of the disputed contracts annotated in Celeste's elegant script. Insert EU phrasing for deniability. Route through Zurich proxy. Ensure Knowles' digital SIG is mimicked. Evidence in hand, Nia photographed each page, her hands trembling. But as she slipped out, a floorboard creaked. Footsteps approached. Celeste in a silk robe, eyes widening in the dim light. "You! What are you doing here?" Nia bolted, heart slamming against her ribs, the folder clutched to her chest. She darted through the gardens, vaulting a low hedge as alarms blared. Sirens wailed in the distance, but she melted into the night, subway-bound. Back home, panting and exhilarated, she pieced it together. Celeste, resentful of Knowles' independence, had allied with Vortex Lyles to orchestrate the fraud. The manipulated contracts would discredit Knoll, activating the will's clause and handing her control. Millions in assets, Vortex's loyalty secured through backroom deals. The conspiracy had emerged from the murk, a venomous web spun by the one person Knoll trusted as family. Nia stared at the photos on her screen, the truth glaring back. Tomorrow's hearing would be explosive. She had the ammunition to expose it all. But danger lurked. Celeste knew her face now, and Vortex played for keeps. As dawn broke, Nia steeled herself. The Maid had become the unraveling thread, and the Empire's facade was about to tear wide open. The veil of night cloaked the city in a shroud of secrets as Nia Johnson navigated the labyrinthine streets of Midtown Manhattan, her footsteps echoing softly against the rain-slicked pavement. The revelation from Celeste's whispered phone call still burned in her mind like a brand. A stepmother's betrayal, woven into the fabric of Vortex Enterprises' machinations. But suspicion alone wouldn't sway a courtroom. Nia needed ironclad proof. Her thoughts turned to Henry Caldwell, Knowles' trusted assistant, who had vanished abruptly 2 weeks before the trial. Henry, with his unassuming demeanor and encyclopedic knowledge of Harrington's dealings, had handled the day-to-day minutiae of contracts and communications. If anyone held the keys to this conspiracy, it was him, or whatever he'd left behind. Nia's pulse quickened as she approached the sleek glass tower housing Harrington Enterprises' satellite office, where Henry had worked. She'd gleaned the address from estate records during her covert sweep the night before. Posing as a delivery courier, complete with a borrowed uniform and clipboard, she slipped past the doorman with a fabricated signature request. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt eternal, the mirrored walls reflecting her determined gaze at her, a reminder of how far she'd strayed from the safety of anonymity. "This is madness," she muttered to herself, but the fire in her chest propelled her forward. Justice wasn't a spectator sport, it demanded risks. The office suite was dimly lit, after-hours security lights casting elongated shadows that danced like conspirators. Nia moved with the stealth of someone accustomed to invisibility, her apron swapped for dark jeans and a hoodie. Henry's corner office was at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. A careless oversight or a trap? She paused, listening for any sign of life. The hum of air conditioning, the distant tick of a clock, nothing more. Pushing the door open, she stepped inside, the scent of stale coffee and printer ink assaulting her senses. The room was a testament to hasty abandonment, drawers half open, papers scattered across the desk like fallen leaves, a laptop charger dangling forlornly without its device. She started with the desk, rifling through stacks of memos and receipts. Mundane at first, expense reports, meeting agendas. But then, buried under a pile of Vortex correspondence, a flash drive labeled Backup VH Revisions. VH Vortex Harrington? Nia's fingers trembled as she pocketed it, her mind racing. Next, the filing cabinet yielded a locked drawer, with a paperclip improvised as a pick, a trick learned from late-night online tutorials. She jimmied it open. Inside, a thick folder caught her eye. Confidential Acquisition Strategy. Heart slamming against her ribs, Nia spread the contents on the desk under her flashlight's beam. Drafts of the disputed contract stared back, multiple versions, each with varying metadata stamps. One showed edits from a New York IP, another from Zurich, timestamps overlapping impossibly. Annotations in Henry's neat handwriting noted, "Insert EU clause per ML directive. Mask Sig Trail. ML, Martin Lyles, Vortex's legal shark. Deeper in, a memo from Lyles himself, dated 3 months prior. To HC, proceed with hostile takeover protocol. Forge revisions to trigger the fraud clause in the EH will. Celeste approves escalation. Use offshore routing for deniability. Projected gain, 23 plus in redirected assets. The words hit like a gut punch. Here was the blueprint. A calculated Tumua Tujic, disguised as a partnership betrayal. Lyles had orchestrated the forgeries to frame Noel, activating the moral disqualification in Edmund Harrington's will, funneling control to Celeste, and by extension, Vortex. But it didn't stop there. Clipped to the memo were bank statements, wire transfers from a Vortex subsidiary to a Swiss account in Henry's name, labeled consulting fees, bribes or hush money, and emails printed and stapled, exchanges between Henry and Lyles, cryptic but damning. Revision complete. Sig mimicked via proxy. C confirms Noel's travel distracts him. Sign blind, Henry wrote. Lyles replied, good. Launch suit, post-signature. Ensure paper trail vanishes. Nia's breath came in shallow gasps, the room closing in as the pieces locked into place. Henry hadn't just assisted. He'd been the linchpin, bought off to execute the forgery, and then silenced by flight. But why flee? Fear of exposure? Or a deeper threat? She photographed everything feverishly, her phone's camera clicking like a metronome of urgency. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Time was slipping away. A sudden noise shattered the silence, a door creaking in the outer hall. Footsteps, deliberate and heavy. Nia's blood turned to ice. She shoved the documents back, heart thundering, and ducked behind the desk. The footsteps paused outside the office, then continued. A security guard on rounds? Or someone sent by Celeste, alerted by last night's intrusion? She waited, breath held in agonizing suspension, until the steps faded. Emerging, she grabbed the folder and flash drive, stuffing them into her bag. Escape was paramount now. The evidence was hers, a ticking bomb of truth. Slipping out the fire exit, Nia descended the stairs 2 at a time, emerging into the cool night air. The city lights blurred as she ran to the subway, paranoia prickling her skin. Every shadow seemed to watch, every passerby a potential spy. Back in her apartment, door bolted thrice, she plugged in the flash drive. More files unfolded, digital drafts with embedded metadata mismatches, audio clips of muffled conversations. Lyles's voice. Celeste wants it airtight. No loose ends with the assistant. Henry's reply. Understood. Payment secures my exit. The conspiracy stood revealed in stark digital clarity, a web of deceit spun by greed, betrayal, and calculated malice. Nia leaned back, exhaustion warring with triumph. She had the documents to dismantle it all, but the cost was mounting. Henry's abrupt flight screamed danger. If Vortex discovered her meddling, she'd be next. Yet as dawn crept through her window, painting the room in golden hues, Nia's resolve hardened. The maid had become the hunter, and the hunt was far from over. The shadows of Harlem lengthened like accusing fingers as Nia Johnson trudged up the worn steps to her basement apartment, the weight of the pilfered documents pressing against her side like a guilty secret. The city night pulsed with life, honking taxis, distant laughter from corner bodegas. But for Nia it felt predatory, every alley a potential ambush. The flash drive and folder from Henry's office burned in her bag, a trove of damning revelations that could topple Vortex Enterprises and expose Celeste's treachery. Yet victory felt distant, overshadowed by the gnawing certainty that her actions had painted a target on her back. She bolted the door behind her, the metallic click echoing her isolation, and sank into her chair, spreading the evidence under the lamp's harsh glow. Sleep eluded her that night, replaced by frantic analysis. The emails between Henry and Martin Lyles revealed a timeline of deceit, but gaps remained. Physical proof of the forgery's origins, witnesses to corroborate the digital trails. Nia knew she needed more. Archived records from Vortex's storage facilities, perhaps hinted at in Henry's notes as off-site backup Zurich link. And then there was Elise Ramirez, a name scribbled in the margins, a junior analyst at Vortex who'd handled metadata logs. If Elise had seen the manipulations firsthand, her testimony could be the linchpin. But reaching out meant risking exposure. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, mirroring Nia's exhaustion. She headed out early, bound for a public library with secure computers to analyze the flash drive further. The subway ride was a blur of faces, each one scanning her with imagined suspicion. At the library, she hunkered in a corner cubicle, plugging in the drive. Files unfolded like a Pandora's box. Encrypted spreadsheets tracking acquisition payoffs, including a line item for HC relocation, $50K. Henry's payoff for fleeing. But one file stood out, an encrypted folder requiring a passcode. Nia's fingers flew, trying combinations from the memos. Celeste Directive, Vortex Air, nothing. Frustration mounted. She needed expert help. Perhaps a freelance digital forensics specialist she could afford on her meager savings. As evening fell, Nia made her way to a dingy storage facility in Queens. The address gleaned from Henry's expense reports. Locker 2913, backup deposit. The place was a fortress of rusted metal units, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry insects. Posing as Henry's proxy with a forged note, her law school ethics crumbling under necessity, she convinced the attendant to grant access. The locker yawned open, revealing a sealed manila envelope stamped Confidential ML. Inside, hard copies of contract drafts with conflicting metadata printouts, one stamped Zurich, another New Jersey, and a USB with audio logs, Lyle's voice dictating, "Ensure the EU phrasing sticks. It'll throw off any American audit." Nia's hands shook. This was gold, physical ties to the offshore forgery. But triumph was short-lived. As she exited the facility, two figures detached from the shadows across the street. Young white men in hoodies, their faces obscured by baseball caps, eyes cold and calculating. They crossed with purposeful strides, blocking her path. "Hey, you the black bitch stirring shit in court?" The taller one snarled, his voice laced with venomous racism. "Think you're some hero maid saving the rich boy?" Nia's blood ran cold and her bag clutched tighter. "Get out of my way," she said, voice steady despite the terror clawing her throat. The shorter one laughed, a guttural sound. "Nah, listen up, monkey. You keep Chen Shan into upper-class business, poking around where you don't belong, and you'll end up in a ditch. We know where you live, that rat hole in Harlem. Back off, or next time, it's not just words." He spat at her feet, the glob landing inches from her shoe, while his companion shoved her shoulder hard enough to stagger her. "Stay in your lane, or we'll make sure you don't walk again." They melted back into the night, leaving Nia frozen, breath ragged. The slur echoed in her mind, a weapon sharper than fists, evoking generations of silenced voices. Tears stung her eyes, not from fear alone, but rage. This was the system's underbelly, intimidation wrapped in prejudice, designed to crush the audacious. She stumbled home, checking over her shoulder, the documents now a heavier burden. Bolting the door, she collapsed, sobs racking her body. But as the panic subsided, resilience ignited. "They think they can break me," she whispered to the empty room. "They don't know who they're dealing with." Dawn brought renewed fire. Nia contacted Elise via an anonymous email drop, sourced from Vortex's leaked directory. "I know what you saw. Help expose it." Hours later, an encrypted reply. "Meet at the diner on 125th, 8 p.m. Come alone." The rendezvous was tense. Elise, a nervous Latina woman in her late 20s, fidgeted with her coffee cup, eyes darting. "I was in the room when Lyles ordered the metadata scrub," she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "Celeste called in, said, 'Make sure Noel takes the fall. They will handle the rest.' I logged the changes, but I kept backups. Here." She slid a thumb drive across the table. Timestamps, alteration logs, even a recorded Zoom snippet of Lyle's barking orders. Gratitude swelled in Nia, but so did caution. Why risk it now? Elise's eyes hardened. Because people like us get stepped on. Are you standing up in court? That gave me courage. With Elise's drive in hand, Nia sought digital analysis. Scraping together funds, She hired a freelance expert via a secure forum, a hacker ethicist named Jax, who worked pro bono for underdogs. Meeting in a crowded cafe, Jax plugged in the drives. "This is sophisticated," he murmured, screens flickering with code. But cracks show VPN hops to Zurich, signature forgery via AI mimicry. I'll compile a report. Irrefutable chain of custody. As Jax worked, Nia's phone buzzed. An unknown number. "We warned you," the text read, attached a photo of her apartment door. Fear surged, but she deleted it, jaw set. The threats were escalating, but so was her arsenal. By night's end, Jax's report confirmed. Forgeries tied directly to Vortex servers, with Celeste's IP in the access logs. Nia had the evidence to shatter the conspiracy, her resilience a shield against the storm. The courtroom awaited, but so did the predators. She wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. The fluorescent hum of the dingy motel room in Brooklyn did little to drown out the storm raging in Nia Johnson's mind. It had been 48 hours since the brutal encounter with those hooded thugs, their racist venom still echoing like a poison in her veins. The documents from Henry's office, Elise's drive, and Jax's forensic report lay scattered on the bed. An arsenal of truth that could ignite a firestorm. But truth, Nia knew, was a double-edged sword. Hidden, it festered, but exposed, it could consume everything in its path. The threats had escalated from shadows to direct assaults, a clear signal that Vortex Enterprises and Celeste Harrington behind the curtain were closing in. Backing down wasn't an option. Silence would be surrender. No, it was time to go public, to turn the tide with the court of public opinion. A press conference. Bold, irreversible, her voice amplified for the world to hear. Nia paced the threadbare carpet, phone in hand, dialing contacts scraped from her relentless networking. Reggie Holmes, her old classmate turned investigative journalist, answered on the second ring. "Nia? Jesus, you sound like you've seen ghosts. What's the play?" "I need a platform," she said, voice steady, despite the knot in her stomach. "A presser, tomorrow. Leak it to the majors, NY Times, CNN, everyone. I've got the smoking gun on Vortex and Celeste, but I need backup. They're coming for me." Reggie whistled low. "This is dynamite. I'll pull strings. Rent a conference room at the old Union Hall downtown. Neutral ground, secure. But Nia, once you light this fuse—" "I know," she interrupted. "Burn it all down if I have to." The next morning dawned with a deceptive calm, the city skyline shrouded in mist as Nia made her way to the venue. She'd barely slept, fortifying her notes with Jax's polished report. Irrefutable proof of forged metadata, offshore routing, and Celeste's IP traces in the alteration logs. Elise had agreed to stand by her side, her testimony a human shield against the corporate machine. Noel. He'd been radio silent since her last update, but whispers from the estate suggested he was reeling from the stepmother's betrayal. Nia adjusted her simple black dress, borrowed from a neighbor, no apron this time, and stepped into the hall. The room buzzed with setup chaos, podium wired for mics, chairs arranged in rows, cameras from local affiliates already rolling test footage. By noon, the space brimmed with reporters, a sea of notepads, recorders, and skeptical eyes. Flash bulbs popped like distant gunfire as Nia ascended the podium, Elise flanking her left, Reggie moderating from the side. The air thickened with anticipation, murmurs rippling. "The Maid lawyer? This better not be a stunt." Nia gripped the lectern, her knuckles paling, and scanned the crowd. In the back, a familiar face, Celeste's aide perhaps, watched with hooded eyes. Vortex had eyes everywhere. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Nia began, her voice cutting through the din like a clarion call. "My name is Nia Johnson. I'm not a licensed attorney. I'm a 25-year-old black woman who dropped out of Columbia Law to care for my dying mother and pay off debts by cleaning houses, including that of Noel Harrington. But today I'm here as a voice for justice, armed with evidence that exposes a conspiracy at the heart of Vortex Enterprises and the Harrington family." The room hushed, pens poised. Nia laid it out methodically, her words a controlled torrent. "The federal fraud charges against Mr. Harrington are fabricated. I've uncovered forged contracts routed through Zurich proxies, laced with European legal phrasing alien to U.S. standards. Metadata shows alterations post-signature, tied to Vortex servers. She projected slides from Jax's report, graphs of IP trails, highlighted emails between Henry and Martin Lyles. Gasps echoed as she revealed the memo. Hostile takeover protocol. The trigger will be via a fraud suit. Celeste approves. Celeste. The name hung like a guillotine. Noel's stepmother, portraying herself as a guardian, has orchestrated this to seize family assets under Edmund Harrington's will. Wire transfers bribe assistants like Henry Caldwell, who fled after planting the forgeries. And Elise Ramirez, a Vortex insider, witnessed it all. Elise stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. I logged the changes under Lyles's orders. Celeste dialed in. Ensure Noel falls. The empire is mine. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after seeing Naya fight. The room erupted. Questions flew like arrows. Proof of Celeste's involvement? Vortex's response? Are you in danger? Naya fielded them with poise, distributing packets of redacted evidence. This isn't speculation, it's forensics. SEC, take note. Vortex's stock manipulations extend beyond this case. Investigate, and you'll find a pattern of corporate sabotage. Flashbulbs blinded her, but Nia pressed on. I've faced threats. 2 men at my door, slinging slurs, warning me to stay in my lane. But I won't. Because if a maid can uncover this, imagine what the overlooks see every day. This is for every black woman, every worker silenced by power. Noel arrived midway, slipping in through a side door, his face a mask of conflicted awe. He joined her at the podium uninvited, his presence electrifying the crowd. I didn't believe her at first, he admitted, voice raw. My stepmother, but the evidence is undeniable. Naya's saved my name and exposed a rot I was blind to. The conference stretched into a frenzy, reporters clamoring for quotes. Outside, protesters gathered, chanting, "Justice for the overlooked." Social media exploded. A Maid for Justice trending, viral clips of Nia's speech amassing millions of views. Vortex's PR scrambled, issuing a terse denial. Baseless allegations. We welcome scrutiny. But the damage was done. By evening, SEC announcements hit the wires. Preliminary inquiry into Vortex Enterprises for securities fraud and manipulation. Nia stepped out into the dusk, adrenaline crashing like waves. Reggie clapped her shoulder. You did it, but watch your back. They've got resources. She nodded, spotting shadowy figures across the street. More watchers? Paranoia gripped her, but resilience burned brighter. The press conference hadn't just exposed the conspiracy, it had ignited a movement. As she vanished into the subway's anonymity, Nia's phone buzzed with tips from anonymous sources. More on Celeste. Check the Cayman accounts. The fight was public now, the spotlight her shield. But in the underbelly of power, retaliation brewed. Nia steeled herself. The revelations had only begun. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan stood as a colossus of justice, its marble facade gleaming under a leaden sky that mirrored the storm brewing within. Courtroom 12B was a pressure cooker of anticipation, packed to the rafters with spectators, journalists, and Vortex Enterprises' stone-faced executives. Whispers slithered through the air like serpents, rumors of SEC probes, leaked memos, and the improbable rise of a maid-turned-crusader. Nia Johnson entered through the heavy oak doors, her steps measured but resolute, the weight of the world's eyes upon her. No longer in an apron, she wore a borrowed suit that fit like borrowed armor. Simple, black, unyielding. Beside her walked Elise Ramirez, pale but defiant, and trailing behind, Noel Harrington, his usual swagger tempered by the raw vulnerability of betrayal. The press conference had unleashed a maelstrom. Headlines screamed, Maid exposes billionaire betrayal. Vortex's stock plummeted 15% overnight, and Celeste Harrington had gone radio silent, her socialite facade cracking under the scrutiny. Threats still lingered, anonymous texts warning of accidents, but Nia had fortified her resolve like a fortress. The evidence folder in her bag was her Excalibur, Jax's forensic breakdown, Elise's logs, Henry's pilfered drafts, and now subpoenaed bank records linking Celeste to offshore payments. This wasn't just a hearing, it was the climax, the moment where shadows yielded to light. Judge Elias Thornton ascended the bench, his gavel striking with finality. Court is in session. United States versus Noel Harrington. Given the new developments and motions filed, this will be the evidentiary hearing to determine dismissal or trial progression. Miss Johnson, as de facto counsel, you may proceed. Nia rose, her voice a clarion in the hushed room. Your Honor, the defense moves for full dismissal on grounds of fabricated evidence and prosecutorial misconduct influenced by Vortex Enterprises. We present irrefutable proof of a conspiracy orchestrated by Martin Lyles and Celeste Harrington to frame Mr. Harrington for fraud, thereby activating a clause in his father's will to seize control of family assets. Elena Reyes, the prosecutor, shot to her feet, her poise fraying at the edges. Vortex had retained additional counsel, a shark named Victor Lang, who flanked her, his eyes predatory. Objection! This is sensationalism, not evidence. The charges stand on solid contracts. Overruled, Thornton intoned, leaning forward. Present your case, Miss Johnson, but tread carefully. Nia projected the first slide, a timeline of forgeries, metadata trails glowing like veins of deceit. Exhibit A, contract revisions showing IP routes to Zurich, altered post-signature. Forensic analysis by independent expert Jax Rivera confirms AI mimicked signatures. Technology Vortex has patented for secure remote signing, ironically. Gasps rippled. Reporters typed furiously. She flipped to emails. Henry Caldwell's correspondence with Lyles. Insert EU phrasing for deniability. Celeste greenlights escalation. And bank wires. $200,000 from a Vortex shell to Henry's Swiss account, labeled consulting. Time days before his disappearance. Lang interjected, voice oily. Circumstantial. No direct link to our client. Nia didn't flinch. Then explain Exhibit C. Celeste Harrington's IP and the access logs for the alteration software. Subpoenaed from Vortex servers, thanks to the SEC's preliminary warrant. The room erupted in murmurs. Celeste, seated in the gallery under subpoena, paled, her manicured hands twisting in her lap. Noel stared at her, eyes burning with unspoken accusation, a son confronting his Judas. Elise took the stand next, sworn in with trembling hands. I was Vortex's data analyst, she began, voice gaining strength. Lyles ordered me to scrub timestamps. Celeste conferenced in, Noel must fall, the will ensures I inherit. Make it airtight. I kept backups because it felt wrong. Watching Nia in court gave me the courage to speak. Tears welled, but her gaze held firm. Cross-examination from Lang was brutal. You're disgruntled, Ms. Ramirez? Fired for incompetence? Elise countered. No, threatened for questioning. Here's the email. Keep quiet or join Henry. The defense's momentum built like a tidal wave. Nia called Jax as an expert witness via video link, his testimony dissecting the digital fingerprints. 99.8% matched to Vortex's proprietary tools. This isn't a coincidence. It's a blueprint. Reyes objected repeatedly, but Thornton overruled, his expression shifting from skepticism to grave concern. This court will not tolerate tampering, he warned. Noel rose unbidden, his voice cracking the air. Your Honor, I trusted my stepmother like family. She raised me after Dad's death, or so I thought. But these documents, they show she poisoned the well to steal what he built. Nia's not just defending me. She's uncovering a truth I was too blind to see. Celeste averted her eyes, the gallery buzzing with shock. A Vortex exec shifted uncomfortably, whispering to Lang. The prosecution's rebuttal faltered. Reyes presented original contracts, but Nia's cross-shredded them. These originals have the same metadata anomalies. Care to explain the Zurich edit at 3 a.m., when Mr. Harrington was asleep in New York? Lang blustered. Technical glitch. But the judge's frown deepened. As closing arguments loomed, tension peaked. Nia stood tall, her words a crescendo. This isn't about a billionaire's fortune. It's about a system rigged to crush the voiceless. I was a maid, invisible, but I saw the cracks. Vortex and Celeste weaponized the law to devour their own. Dismiss this farce, Your Honor, and let true justice prevail. Thornton recessed briefly, the room a cauldron of speculation. Upon return, his verdict thundered. After reviewing the evidence, forged documents, witness testimony, and clear conspiracy, the court dismisses all charges against Noel Harrington with prejudice. Furthermore, this matter is referred to the U.S. Attorney for Criminal Prosecution of fraud, tampering, and obstruction against Vortex Enterprises, Martin Lyles, and Celeste Harrington. Pandemonium ensued. Cheers from supporters, Vortex reps bolting for exits, journalists surging forward. Celeste was detained on the spot, her pleas drowned in flashes. Noel embraced Nia awkwardly. "You saved more than my name. You saved my soul." Elise wept in relief. Outside, under a breaking sky, Nia faced the media swarm. Today, a black woman from the shadows became a symbol, but this is for every overlooked fighter. Justice isn't given. It's seized. The world watched, her story viral, a beacon for the marginalized. Threats might persist, but Nia Johnson had become untouchable, a legend forged in the fire of resilience. The echoes of the gavel's final strike lingered in Nia Johnson's soul, like the aftershocks of an earthquake, reshaping the landscape of her life forever. As she stepped out of the courthouse into the blinding flash of cameras and the roar of a crowd that had swelled into a movement, the world felt both vast and intimate. Protesters waved signs emblazoned with "Justice in an Apron" and "Nia's Voice for All," their chants a rhythmic heartbeat. No more shadows, no more silence. Nia paused on the steps, the cool breeze carrying the scent of impending rain, and for the first time in months allowed herself a genuine smile. The victory wasn't just Noel's, it was hers. A black woman from the Bronx who had scrubbed floors by day and studied law by night, now etched into the annals of justice as a beacon of defiance. But triumph, Nia knew, was a fleeting guest. Legacy was the enduring host. That evening, as the city lights twinkled like distant stars from her Harlem window, she sat with Reggie in her cramped apartment, the evidence binder finally closed on the table. "You did it, Nia," Reggie said, raising a mug of cheap coffee and toast. "Vortex is crumbling. Lyles arrested, Celeste facing indictment, SEC's digging deep. Shareholders are fleeing like rats from a sinking ship." Nia nodded, but her eyes held a quiet storm. It's not over. Those threats, they were the system's last gasp. But what about the next Maid? The next overlooked soul facing the machine? Elise had called earlier, her voice buoyant. "My family's safe now. You gave us hope." Yet Nia felt the weight of unfinished business, a fire kindled in the courtroom that demanded fuel. The call from Noel came at dawn, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. "Nia, meet me at the estate. We need to talk." She arrived as the sun crested the horizon, the mansion's glass walls reflecting a golden promise. Noel waited in the study, the room where she'd once dusted shelves, now a symbol of transformation. He looked older, wiser, the betrayal by Celeste having carved lines of humility into his face. "I was blind," he admitted, gesturing to a chair as equals. "You saw what I couldn't. My stepmother's greed, Vortex's rot. But more than that, you fought when no one else would. Your story, dropping out of Columbia, bearing your dreams to pay debts, yet never stopping. It's extraordinary." Nia's guard softened, but she met his gaze squarely. "Extraordinary? Or just survival? Black women like me don't get fairy tales. We forge them." Noel leaned forward, earnest. "Then let me help forge yours. Join Harrington Enterprises as a strategic advisor. Oversee ethics, compliance, and the work. Full salary, benefits. And I'll fund your return to Columbia. Finish that degree. No more scrubbing floors unless you choose to." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline, tempting yet fraught. Nia hesitated, memories flashing. Her mother's weary smile, the slurs from those thugs, the courtroom's mocking laughter. Why me? Pity or PR spin? Noel's eyes flashed with genuine respect. "Because you're brilliant. You dismantled an empire with notes and nerve. And I owe you my life. But this isn't charity, it's partnership. Help me rebuild clean. No more blind spots." She accepted, a handshake sealing the pact. The transition was a whirlwind. Nia enrolled at Columbia part-time, Her classes a triumphant return to the halls she'd left in sorrow. Professors remembered her spark. Classmates whispered in awe. With Noel's backing, she balanced coursework with her new role, auditing Harrington's deals to root out corruption, implementing transparency protocols that became industry models. Vortex's fallout rippled. Indictments rolled in, class action suits from defrauded partners, and Celeste's assets frozen as she awaited trial. Lyles turned to state's evidence, his confessions a cascade that exposed deeper corporate webs. Yet Nia's true legacy blossomed beyond boardrooms. Inspired by her journey, she expanded the People's Law Project, a fledgling idea born in her basement, now a nonprofit powerhouse. With Noel's seed funding and grants pouring in from inspired donors, the project opened offices in Harlem, Brooklyn, and Queens. Volunteers, law students, retired attorneys, community activists flocked to provide free legal aid to workers crushed by the system. Janitors facing wage theft, nurses battling discrimination, immigrants ensnared in fraudulent contracts. Nia led workshops in church basements and union halls, her voice a rallying cry. Law isn't a weapon for the elite, it's a shield for us all. Learn it, wield it, change it. One crisp fall evening, a year after the trial, Nia stood before a packed community center in the Bronx, the mural behind her depicting a woman in an apron holding scales of justice. I was invisible, she told the crowd. Single mothers, factory workers, dreamers like her younger self. But invisibility is power if you use it to see what others miss. We toppled Vortex not with money, but with truth. Now, let's build a future where no one fights alone. Applause thundered, but a young black girl approached afterward, eyes wide. Miss Johnson, I want to be like you, but school's hard. My mom's sick. Nia knelt, heart aching with familiarity. Then start here. She handed her a project pamphlet. We'll help with tutors, aid. You're not alone. That night, back at her upgraded apartment, still modest, rooted in her origins, Nia reflected on the path. Threats had faded, replaced by fan mail and speaking invites. Noel had become a mentor friend, his company thriving ethically. Elise ran a project branch, channeling her trauma into advocacy. But shadows lingered, a late-night call from an unknown number. You think it's over? Empires rebuild. Nia's response was swift. Trace it, report it, fortify. Resilience wasn't a one-time act. It was daily armor. As she drafted legislation for whistleblower protections, partnering with lawmakers inspired by her story, Nia whispered to her mother's photo, "We did it, Mama, and we're just starting." From anonymous Maid to icon, Nia Johnson proved that courage and truth could rewrite destinies, regardless of origin. Her legacy wasn't in headlines, but in the lives she empowered, the ripple of justice spreading like wildfire, illuminating futures once shrouded in darkness. And there you have it, the inspiring tale of Nia Johnson, a woman who turned invisibility into unbreakable strength, proving that justice isn't reserved for the elite, but forged by the resilient. What do you think about Nia's journey? Did her courage resonate with you or remind you of your battles? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me on this roller coaster. Your support means the world. Until next time, stay bold and keep fighting for what's right. See you soon.